Hello again. I am sat here wondering how Labour is the Labour Party. Classic question might be how the major parties are still sticking with their original ideologies, their original remit, and how they've changed over the years. And this current Labour Party is about to have what they're calling a spring statement. It looks like it's going to be slightly larger than what we would normally think of as a spring statement. It looks like it's going to be more like a budget, really. And the rumours are that there's going to be cuts of 10,000 positions in the civil service. Cuts to public spending isn't what we would normally associate with a Labour government. So it begs the question: how Labour are they? Are they sticking to their original views, their original principles? And I think we can say that it looks like they are not. In fact, I think we can argue that they are shifting to the right in politics in a number of ways, most notably on immigration, and probably because of a perceived threat from reform, which is obviously has been going up in the polls. I think that could be a big mistake. I think people who want to vote reform are wanting to vote reform because they are fed up with the two main parties, largely the Conservatives actually, but they're beginning to encroach on Labour as well. But I think it's a mistake to go after those votes in the hope that you keep or maybe claw back some of your traditional voters. It's all very odd. From this Labour government is very odd. It is it's difficult at this stage to say, well, is it Blairite? Is it New Labour? Not quite. It certainly isn't old Labour. So, just think about the journey that they've gone on over the last few years, because it's not that long ago that Jeremy Corbyn was the leader. And while he's presented as incredibly far left, he isn't really incredibly far left. The 2017 manifesto was quite modest in its social democracy. 2019 is an odd one because a lot of those same measures were there, but they kept adding things to the manifesto after the manifesto was published. So they started to look a little bit unbelievable in what they were promising. But I think the situation was already pretty dire for Corbyn in 2019 because that election was all about Brexit. And Boris Johnson saying "get Brexit done" continuously was a call from it matched the desires of an awful lot of the population, so it was understandable why they lost. I think that 2017, though, very different prospect, quite a modest social democratic manifesto portrayed as extremely left wing. And the people went for it. The people confounded what all of the commentators were saying, which was that Theresa May's Conservative Party was going to wipe the floor with Corbyn. Bigger majority for Theresa May was bound to happen. It was an incredibly long campaign. It was an excruciatingly long campaign, with some local elections at the beginning of it, where Labour did terribly. And it's very unusual for a campaign to swing in another direction. And it swung. And it swung in Corbyn's favour. And of course, Theresa May lost her majority. The Labour Party has changed an awful lot in that short time. 6 years doesn't sound like, or maybe it sounds like an awful long time if you're doing your A-levels. But 6 years in the great scheme of things is not very long at all. The world has transformed in that time. And Labour has transformed with Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves with this drive for growth, which which seems to be ever failing. And the latest plan seems to be more austerity. I worked in the Home Office, government department, the Home Office, in 2010 when the coalition government came along. And the coalition government were, let me get rid of that off the screen. The coalition government were going to be putting through austerity measures, cutting public spending, reducing the size of the civil service dramatically. And I saw the impact that had. So if you're going to cut 10,000 jobs across the civil service, actually in departmental terms, some of these departments are huge, and the number of people that they need to cut might not be massive. Each department might have a small amount of that. But you have to consider the impact. First of all, I immediately think to the impact to the people involved, the people who lose their jobs. How does that, obviously that causes them trouble, causes them pain. It also means that there's people going home from their job without fresh money coming in each month, and therefore they're not able to spend in their communities. And so there's a knock-on effect to the local community. The local economy suffers as a result of that. You could also argue, well, those people will get paid off in some way. They'll get some kind of compensation, and therefore maybe they've got other things they can do with their money, and maybe actually it boosts the local economy for a little while. Who knows? It's also, because you've got to pay people off, there's an immediate cost to the government. You get rid of 10,000 people, you've got to pay them compensation. How does that help the national economy? It might do later down the line, but not immediately. It's an immediate cost, and the Treasury is really good at talking about how other departments have to be smaller. And the Treasury is not so good at saying, oh yeah, that department needs a whole load of cash, here it is. They get very difficult when it comes to cabinet ministers wanting more money at a budget time. You can have a little bit more, but you can't have exactly what you want. And the whole process is really bizarre, because government departments will know that they're not necessarily going to get everything they ask for. So it's best to inflate what you ask for. It's best to ask for more than what you think you need, just in case you don't get it all. And so there's this bizarre game that goes on where the Treasury has far too much power. And you know, this is going to be bizarre, because I'm going to find myself agreeing with Liz Truss on something. Terrible. This should never happen. Anyway, it's going to happen because I think she's right about something to do with British politics, and I've seen other commentators talk about this. Steve Richards has talked about this on his podcast Rock and Roll Politics, the idea of Treasury orthodoxy. Liz Truss takes it so much further, but the idea that the Treasury has too much power and is inflexible, I think, has a lot going for it, and it must be terribly frustrating for parties to come in and find that the Treasury expects you to do everything their way. If you win a majority, surely you get to decide what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Clearly not. So the Treasury is the one that is saying this is how you're going to get growth. You're going to need to cut down public spending, and we've also seen the impact of these policies. These announcements coming this week on disability benefits and so on. Another human cost, really, and a real risk where Labour is going to be taking money away from what you would imagine is some of their core supporters. a chunk of people who would see the Labour Party standing for equality and standing for historically a welfare state and an NHS that protects people from the cradle to the grave was the original. That's what we were brought up to believe. We're going to be looked after forever. Clearly not. But what I wanted to talk about was this time I had when I was working in government at the time of the coalition. Because at that time I was at the Home Office. I was also a trade union representative for staff in the Passport Office, mainly the London Passport Office, but at times I was on the committee for the whole of the country in the Passport Office, and also on a committee for the whole of the civil service in the southeast, and on a committee looking at international matters for the southeast at the TUC. So I've had a certain amount of experience in dealing with government decisions actually on the office floor. And what we saw at the Passport Office when the cuts came and the coalition decided to cut staff massively, they offered voluntary redundancy. They closed a whole load of departments, including mine in the end, so I ended up losing my job. But before that, before I lost my job, I noticed that they offered so many redundancies and so many people were willing to take them that the jobs weren't getting done. That people weren't getting their passports on time. So this was the office that makes the passport. And if you suddenly lose a whole load of staff and you're offering a service where people can get their passport within a certain amount of time, people will leave it to the last minute and then end up not getting their passport in time to get onto the plane that they want. And it ended up being investigated by the Home Affairs Select Committee. The person I sat next to in the trade union office went down to Parliament and gave evidence about what had happened in the passport office, and it ended up with the Passport Office being taken back into direct control of ministers, because it was at that point arm's length. And the knock-on effect was a government service that was initially absolutely fantastic, with people working their socks off to get this product to people, a product that recognised around the world as a good product and a safe and secure product, just wasn't getting to people on time. And that was a direct result of cuts. And so if you cut jobs in government departments, there will be implications. And so my feeling is that you can't really do this without planning in advance. You can't really cut those jobs without thinking, what are people doing that we actually require them to do? Because while you can say there's a lot of waste in the civil service, and I have no doubt that there's a lot of waste in the civil service, taking people away from their jobs when you don't fully understand exactly what it is that they do can be haphazard and can lead to unintended consequences. So I'm going to be very interested to see what scandals turn up down the line. At some point, there is going to be an issue with a government department not doing the things that it was supposed to be doing because it's lost its staff. It's almost inevitable. I can see it coming, unless they plan very carefully in each department to make sure that the stuff that is required still actually gets done. But we will see. And I think the Labour Party is heading in directions that it really doesn't need to. I think it is perhaps listening to focus groups and thinking about the rise of reform, and forgetting that actually back in July last year, people voted for change. Change has been what people have been voting for consistently now since the financial crisis of 2008. and I'm not sure that they get the change that they want. I think the politicians are pretty bad at working out what it is that the public wants. I think the public last July were actually quite well to the left of the Labour Party on the whole, and that, you know, a split in the right of voting, where you've got the Conservatives and Reform vying for each other's votes, gives an opportunity to the left, actually, and it is an opportunity that is being missed. But we will see. We will see what happens. So that spring statement is going to be interesting, and is going to set the scene for months to come. And we will see what the impact is. And some of the impact, the ripples from this, the ripples could take a while to come through, but there will be implications, and we will be able to monitor them. Wonderful. Happy studying. Bye-bye.